I'm Laura Smith, and it has been my pleasure to be part of the steering group delivering the political education project to you. We've covered a range of topics in our first 10-week course, but everything we've discussed and this whole project has been about a crucial, wider issue: the importance of developing and supporting independent, working class organisation. We all know in different ways how our class has been on the back foot, not just since 2008, but long before then, with the state's war on and defeat of the miners. Workers in Britain and around the world have seen falling real wages, the collapse and dismantling of our historic organisations, declining union membership, and since 2008, austerity and attacks on our rights and living conditions. The COVID crisis has shown that this is on track to get worse. The government have used the opportunity to line the pockets of their class and introduce further attacks on our rights. As and when the lockdown eases, we know that we can expect mass unemployment, new forms of austerity, and a state that will attempt to crush any opposition to the status quo. Nobody is coming to save us but us. So the need to think about and work on rebuilding independent working class power is essential. And that is what our final session focuses on.
So this is our final session, which looks at the important topic of working class power. How do we build working class power, and how do we think through the ideas around this? So obviously the political education project, we view what we're doing in terms of trying to support and develop independent working class political education as a part of this bigger process that is needed to build independent working class power in order for us to be in a position to change society and to transform it in ways that are beneficial for the great majority of us. So we've got 3 readings for this topic, and we want you to, as much as you can, engage with all 3 of them. We've kept them quite short and hopefully accessible, and I'm just going to say a few words about the key ideas and the key questions to look for in these 3 readings. The first one is what's known as the Provisional Rules of the International Working Men's Association. And the International Working Men's Association was also known as the First International, and it was the first attempt to bring together workers and workers' movements from around Western Europe and further afield as well, in order to develop a politics of working class power and working class organisation. When you're reading the rules, focus on the first part, focus really on the introduction and the preamble. Don't worry so much about the numbered rules, they're of historical interest, but mainly focus on the opening section and the preamble to the rules, and see here that this first attempt at building an international of workers focused on what's known as the self-emancipation of the working class. This relates back to some of the stuff we discussed in our first session with Hal Draper and the idea of building socialism from below. So we see that from the very earliest days, the workers' movement was focused on working class self-activity, building independent working class institutions, and these being central to developing socialism within our societies. The second reading we've asked you to look at is a piece by Alan Sears, and it develops an interesting idea that Sears has been working on, which is the idea of infrastructure of dissent. And again, it's a short piece. Sears has you can read a longer version of this in Sears' book, which is called The Next New Left, which is an interesting book. But in this short article, Sears gives a concrete example from a specific period in Canadian labour history where Canadian workers were able to organise and build together impressive and long-term sustained strikes. But Sears makes the important point that this wasn't just because of the unions, it was because of the bigger infrastructure of dissent that the working class had built in and around their areas. So whether it's your local choir, whether it's a reading club, whether it's local cafes, church groups, whatever it is, the important thing is that Sears points out is that there was a wider structure of resources that helped build working class solidarity and support people engaged in struggles and in fights going forward. And the third piece we've asked you to read for this session is by Bill Fletcher Jr. Now, it's focused on the US in the first instance, but the lessons we can draw from it are equally relevant to what's going on in Britain and Ireland and elsewhere. And it identifies 5 key things for rebuilding the labour movement. And the 5 key issues he looks at are the need for the labour movement to engage in ideological debate and political education, which is crucially important, the need for the labour movement to rebuild, and especially in new industries, whether that's the gig economy or whatever it might be, the need for the labour movement and trade unions to broaden the scope of their activities. So while focusing obviously on workplace disputes and arguments around that, the labour movement and trade unions needs to also be engaged in those bigger debates that we're all involved in around new forms of austerity, around climate change in Britain and elsewhere at the moment, around defending the right to protest. So the unions need to move beyond so-called bread and butter issues. We need to move beyond simply looking at the question of their own members and so forth, to that bigger question of the challenges that are faced by our class more broadly, which again is a really important point for us all to think about. Fletcher also identified the fact, and this was something that this is a piece that was written before the sort of COVID lockdown had really bitten, but has identified the fact that we're going to face in the short to medium term extensive and sustained long-term unemployment right around the developed world and in Britain and Ireland and so forth as well. So the need for trade unions to have a very focused and a very specific policy on unemployed workers and to help build a movement around unemployed workers. So from these three different pieces, we see that the focus, there's hardly any mention of elections and of electoral politics. And that'll be an important discussion for us to have and something for us to think through. James Connolly, the Scottish-Irish Marxist who was very prominent in Britain and Ireland in the early 20th century, he once said that the fight for control of the political state, so that is elections to Parliament, is not the battle, but it's just the echo of the battle. The real battle is in building community power, building working class strength within trade unions, and developing that so that we're in a position to actually transform society. That was Connolly's view back then, and one of the questions for us to consider today is whether or not you think that's true. You know, what should our focus be on, and how do we relate the work we do? If you are involved with some form of electoral politics, how do you relate that to the bigger projects of community organising, trade union activity, and also political education, the sort of work we're doing within PEP? They're the three readings, and these are some of the issues to think about. And coming into the session, we'd ask you to focus on some key questions. So, for example, what is the importance of independent working class organisation? Do we need independent working class organisation? And if so, why? Why is that important? Secondly, if we are trying to build independent working class organisation, what should be our areas of focus? What's really important? Short term, building through the medium term and into the longer term. Where should we be thinking about directing our energies? What sort of organisations and networks do we need? And how do we get there? You know, these are the sort of real challenges and the real questions we can think about. And then finally, which sort of brings us back to what we're doing here, how does this relate to political education? What's the importance and the role of political education in all of this? And how can we build on what we've done with PEP, for example, what others do in the Marx Memorial Library, or for example in the Trademark in Belfast? So there's some work being done already. What more can we do, and how do we do that, and how does that feed into and support building independent working class power? So they're the key ideas and the key themes we're going to look at in this session. We'll send out additional readings via social media. You'll be able to find it on Twitter and on Facebook on our various channels, so please keep an eye out for that. But again, take the time to do reading for this session. Come to the Socialist Sunday School ready to ask questions, ready to engage, and we're very much looking forward to seeing you there. We'd also ask that you again share this with your friends and share it with your workmates. And also, once all of this is done, this will be the end of our first 10-week course. We're going to ask you for feedback on what we've done so far. Again, we've launched this to try and get political education on the agenda and to stress the importance of it. And because of lockdown, we've been constrained to doing it in an online format, but we're constantly keeping it under review and looking at ways we can improve it. And we've had a bunch of comrades get involved and now help out and build the project voluntarily. So get in touch with us and let us know what more you think we could be doing, what we should be doing differently, what we've done well, what we can improve on, and we'll look to do that. So we look forward to seeing you all in the Sunday School, and thanks very much for all your time and energy so far. We're hoping to go from strength to strength with this project.